Have you ever faced a situation where your application needs to respond quickly, but you just can't seem to get it right? If that's you, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into how to respond immediately from an Azure Function PowerShell HTTP trigger and then send a follow-up response out of band. I totally understand how frustrating it can be when your application times out because it takes too long to respond. You're not alone in this. Many developers encounter similar issues when working with HTTP triggers. Let's look at the specific question at hand. One user asked, "How do I respond immediately from an Azure Function PowerShell HTTP trigger and then send a follow-up response to another URL?" They mentioned that if the response takes longer than 3 seconds, Slack times out. Sound familiar? Let's explore this together. So what's happening here? When your Azure function takes too long to respond, Slack expects an immediate acknowledgement followed by a delayed response. This is a common requirement for integrations, and we can definitely work around it. And stick around. I have a great tip at the end that will help you streamline your Azure function responses even further. To respond immediately from an Azure Function PowerShell HTTP trigger, the user should first create a simple response that acknowledges the Slack command. This response should be sent right away to avoid timeouts. Next, the user needs to ensure that the function does not block while processing the request. This can be achieved by using a background job to handle the longer processing tasks. After sending the immediate response, the user can then proceed to send the out-of-band message to the specified response URL. This is done using the invoke REST method command. Finally, the user should test the entire flow to ensure that both the immediate response and the out-of-band message are sent correctly. This can be done by triggering the Slack command and observing the responses. Fun fact, did you know that the first web server was created in 1990? It was a simple program that served HTML files. Look how far we've come since then. Now, let's look at the answers provided by other users. An alternative approach suggested by another user is to use a queue with your Azure function. Instead of processing everything in the HTTP trigger, you can push a message to a queue and return immediately. Then, set up another Azure function that listens to that queue and handles the logic. Here's the pro tip I promised. Always test your Azure functions thoroughly to ensure they handle both immediate and delayed responses correctly. This will save you a lot of headaches down the line. And there you have it. You should now be able to respond immediately from your Azure function and send follow-up messages seamlessly. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe for more tips and tricks.